Next up, we have an award-winning author, a middle school science instructor, Jennifer Swanson. Jennifer is the author of Brain Games, Save the Crash Test Dummies, and the book we're going to discuss today, Everything You Need to Ace Chemistry in One Big Fat Notebook. Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Oh boy. When I saw this book on the list, I just had chills go down my spine like chemistry again. I didn't do so well the first time.
Don't feel bad. I get that from everybody.
I am a guy who made a C in chemistry many years ago. I was not a good chemistry student. I wish this book was around when I was taking chemistry. What made you decide to write this book and teach chemistry the way you do?
Well, I will say that this is part of the Workman Publishing Big Fat Notebook series. So they came to me to ask me to write it. And it was, I'll say I had to take a few steps back. I mean, I was a chemistry major. I went to the Naval Academy. But that was a long time ago. And B, I was not a straight A student there in chemistry. So it was tough to write this book. But honestly, now all of these years later, I think I understand chemistry a lot better than I did when I was in high school and college. Because when you have to write about it, you really have to understand what you're saying, right?
Mhm. Well, you do that so beautifully. First, your writing is so clear. I understood it, and it's funny. Our listeners didn't hear this, but I tried to give you a little test in our pre
Oh yes.
discussion, and she just nailed the thing. And I'm glad she didn't ask me questions about chemistry. Certainly, you address this question so beautifully in your book, which is why does chemistry matter? So, why does chemistry matter in our world?
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny. I was just listening to Philippe and Asselin, and it's like water chemistry is everywhere. Everything you do, everything that is made of, the chairs you're sitting on, the headphones you're wearing, there's chemistry involved with all of that. So it's really important. But if I can say, like you, a lot of people are scared of it, right? They're like, oh,
Mhm.
and what I wanted to do with this book was make it less scary. Sometimes you can just say, "Hey, I'm not taking the chemistry class, right? I'm going to take this
Mhm.
different class." Sometimes you have to take the chemistry class. Okay, then if that's the class you have to take, and maybe you're not so excited about it, how can we make it fun? How can we make it interesting? How can we make it easier for you to understand? And that's what I tried to do with the book was give relate to things that people know um, and can say, okay, chemistry is like cooking. Do you like to
Mhm.
cook? Okay, let's start with that. Right. And that kind of makes people feel like, oh, I can cook. Right? Like
Mhm.
I'm doing chemistry. All right. Right.
I've had some failed experiments on that front
Well, you know,
quite often, but I keep trying.
who doesn't?
Jennifer, I'm curious, what was your favorite experiment or lesson in the book? Because there were so many really cool ones.
Oh my gosh, that's hard to say honestly because when I wrote this book, we were trying to pick the topics that fit into like all of the US different curriculums and everybody has different ones. Um I think one of my favorite experiments, which I'm not even sure made it to the book, is the volcano experiment. Who hasn't done that
Mhm.
with Diet Coke and Mentos or whatever? Because there's all different versions of it. But for me, that's chemistry at its basics because you're taking two different chemicals, materials, putting them together and whew, you get to
Mhm.
this huge thing. And everyone can relate to how cool that is. And then the next step is, all right, let's write the chemical equation for that. Let's get a little
Mhm.
more familiar with what we're doing. And you introduce it that way.
Well, I did the experiment just before the show started, right in the hallway. My favorite chapter that you had in here was on bonding. Can you
Oh,
talk
yes.
about that? Let's just zoom right in on one topic. The chapter on bonding. Tell me about that.
So the chapter on bonding is actually probably one of the most important concepts in chemistry for everybody to understand. And it starts small and then you move out. So bonding is how two atoms work together. So the most basic one that you were just talking about is water. It's H2O. Okay, so there's an oxygen and there's two hydrogens. And then you talk about how where the electrons, those are the basic little at the little things around the molecule, right? The nucleus, how they interact and move around. And if you start with bonding and understand how these two things fit together, then you can go into more depth if you need to. But that helps you understand how carbon is in so much of what we do, and water and oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen and all of these different things. And Aslan and Philippe were also talking about pollution. So this is in the ocean. You can understand the chemistry of how the ocean changes because of pollution or acidification.
Well, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
How many thank you letters have you received from AP chemistry students?
Well, I have to say that this book came out during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
So, and I was pretty surprised because I mean, right now, who knows how a book's going to do when it comes out during the pandemic. And if you go to Amazon, I think I have over 1,800 five-star reviews.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, I have also gotten emails saying, on this page, there is this
Yeah.
typo, which happens, that happens. But I have to say, I'm really excited that that many kids are reading it. And if I can say, my husband works at a medical device company. Several of the people that work there that have PhDs have this book on their desk. I'm like, this is cool, right?
Well, I am passing it to my son so he can pass the AP chemistry
Yeah,
test
good luck to him
100%.
on that. That's a tough test.
Thank you so very,
Thanks
very
for having me,
much.
Chris.